See, I'm already losing my words. Kia ora everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I will be the facilitator mostly for this session, and this is around the data research and evidence strategy. I am being joined by some of our wonderful kākaho who are going to be talking to their experiences of working with the data research and evidence strategy. I will just before we get started, as is always, it's always best to start with a karakia. You're welcome to join in if you do know the karakia, and then I will get into introductions. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, kia hea aki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. So as I was saying briefly, I am joined today, and I'll get them to wave as I mention who they are. So I have the lovely Amanda Bond from National Library, who works within School Support Services. And then I'm also joined by Mātauranga Wakefield from Christchurch City Libraries. I have Kay Whiria from Hamilton City Libraries. Yay, just wave, just so they know who you are. And then I also have the last but by ways, not the least, Danny Tiata from Upper Hutt City Libraries. So as I said, I will be the host today. My name is Carla Jeffrey. I'm part of the Whiria to Tāngata program, which has been working with the kākaho as to how we can apply and kind of make better the pieces of work that had been, I guess, National Library had asked to be done. So there was two pieces of work. We had Te Tūtara, which is a workforce capability framework, which some of you are familiar with. But today's session will be around the data research and evidence strategy. So this came about due to the fact that in libraries, we're always aware that there are challenges around funding, and that applies across the entire sector. But we mostly hear about those challenges with regards to the public libraries. So one way that we can help mitigate this and improve things for us going into the future is by getting some very good practices in place around collecting data. And then it's how we tell those stories, which would hopefully give us some really good impactful stories that we can then tell to our councils, our organisations, to then improve the funding that we could perchance get, or even justify actually our existence, because sometimes it is just about justifying our existence and how valuable we are to our communities. I'm also joined by Jacinta Paranahi Ane, but unfortunately she's having some real issues with her audio at this point in time. Jacinta was going to talk to us today, particularly around the ethical use of data and around Māori data sovereignty. But what I will do is, for your viewing pleasure, she was one of the key authors on a piece of work for Stats New Zealand. Bear with me one moment, I'm just going to bring it up. And I'll put the link in the chat for you guys, which would be well worth a read if you have a particular interest in this space. We were very lucky in that Jacinta came and talked to our kākaho at the start of the program around her experiences of working with data, particularly when she was at Stats New Zealand. So like I said, I will put that link in the chat for you in just a moment. So moving forward, I'm going to now chuck into the ones who you're actually more interested in hearing than myself. So I'm going to ask Amanda to kind of kick us off. And what I've asked Amanda to talk to us about today is her experiences of, the challenges with school libraries and data, and which is particularly apt for considering school libraries come under the Ministry of Education. So they have like a different governing base compared to a lot of other libraries out there. So without further ado, without giving anything away, I will palm it off to Amanda. Please feel free if you wanted to add any other details about who you are, Amanda, please do so. But otherwise, the floor is yours.
Kia ora, thank you, Carla. Kia ora, everyone. Amanda Bond, toko ingoa. I work at the Tumuaki Makaro part of National Library Services to Schools, and I was very privileged to be one of the kākaho working with Whiria to Tāngata over the last 8 months. We're coming close to the end of this project, and one of the things that some of the many things we've been asked to consider is the wonderful work that's come out of the New Zealand Library Partnership Program. And four major aspects of this work has been Mātauranga Māori, workforce capability with Te Tautura as the framework, the data research and evidence strategy, and collective impact. So it's really fabulous to see everyone here today, because obviously we're better together and we can learn really well from one another. So every time I was asked to look at those areas, I was thinking about my experience as a school librarian. Part of my background is that I had the privilege of doing a postgraduate diploma here in New Zealand that allowed me to be a school librarian here. I'd already done my teacher training and my bachelor's degree, and I was practicing as a secondary school English teacher, but I realised very quickly the value of school libraries, and so went into that area. And then having done that, I was very privileged to have a post in an international school as a teacher librarian full-time, and just returned to New Zealand with all of that experience and understanding. The data research and evidence is a really important part of school library life. One of the key things in all education at the moment, and has been for the last, 20 years, so it's not new, is evidence-based practice. So what are we doing that makes an impact for our students? How do we know we're doing really good things? How can we learn from what we're doing? How can we improve on it? And so this has permeated education, and of course school libraries are not left behind in this at all. So data research and evidence is really important to school librarians. The thing about school libraries in New Zealand is that they're not mandated. And so if a school has a library, that's a brilliant thing for lots of reasons. And I don't need to go into all of those reasons with you here now, but they're not mandated, and quite often, because they're funded out of the general grant that a school gets, there's no specific funding for a school library. Quite often you have to show the purpose and the value of them. So data research and evidence has two really important aspects for school librarians. Not only does it help you with the planning and making sure that what you're doing is really effective for your school community, but it also shows the value of what you're doing and why you should keep doing it, because there's a cost to it for the school, of course. So when you look at the strategy and the links that Carla's been sharing online, part of it is to look really carefully at your stakeholders. And for a school, that's very directly your students and teachers, obviously, but also the families of the students. It's your school board of trustees, but in terms of your wider community, it's also the ministry and all of the things that go with that. So there's quite a few direct reports, but also very broader and bigger reports. So we try and really encourage the school librarians that we're working with to really collect data in lots of different ways. So I had a really cool example of that happening just a few weeks ago with my colleague who visited a school, and the school librarian had received a loan from National Library, and she had to be out of the classroom, and her colleague had come in to look after the books, and she'd put on the whiteboard, read this book to her colleague, and it was out of the loan. And so what the colleague did that wonderfully and brilliantly, and then next day she arrives in her classroom and the children had put on the whiteboard a number of books that said read this book to the teacher. So they'd taken that up, and she'd taken some photos of that, and so that became part of her evidence, and a really great thing to share. So evidence for school librarians, because they're really busy, as we all are, can be photographs, your annual report. It's not just the data that we get through circulation, it's all of the extra things that we're doing. We at National Library, every year there is an annual data collection, and I will put in the link once I finish speaking about it. We do a big report on the state of school libraries in New Zealand. So that adds to a cumulative longitudinal study. And the report's published every year. The 2022 one is almost ready to be published. So the link I'm going to put in the chat is for the 2021 report. But the value of this is it's collecting data along the way. It is an opt-in report. So we advertise it quite widely that we'd love to get feedback from school libraries, and we get all this feedback asking the same questions every year. I think there are a few extra ones we add in occasionally to try and add that in. So that's reported on as well through the National Library. So that's an opt-in frame to share some of that data together and just to see what's going on. As a school librarian, you can be quite isolated in your school. You're the only person quite often who has that role. But also there's a bit of isolation in terms of, I don't know what other schools are doing, what's normal for school libraries in New Zealand, because there's no mandates, there's no guidelines, there's no standards applied in New Zealand. So we kind of have to work out amongst ourselves what's going on, what's a normal budget, what's your circulation, is your collection growing or shrinking, and all those sorts of things are collected. So that's just a brief overview of what's going on in schools. Data research and evidence is vital, and I was really encouraged that with the LIANZA projects that have been going on, and Anna, forgive me if I get this wrong when I'm talking about it, but the evaluation projects that are going, and I've been attending all the webinars of the reports backs from that, and I was really heartened to see a number of school librarians were participating in that wonderful piece of work that was going on through LIANZA. So we're very keen. We need our capability to increase in this area, and the strategy really helps us to see what's going on in the really large picture of libraries in New Zealand and have some ways of applying that to our schools. So thanks for the opportunity to share, and I think I'm passing it on to Mātauranga. Is that right, Carla?
No, I'll take it back. Just
Okay.
I'll just check in if there are any questions from anyone. Otherwise, we're happy to answer questions at the end of the session. Or you're more than welcome, I should have said this earlier, to put your questions in the chat. I am monitoring that, so I can always, if I feel it's a good time, interrupt and ask those questions on your behalf. I'm just going to take this quick opportunity to check in. Jacinta, is your audio still deciding to misbehave?
Hello, hello.
Oh,
Charlie.
bonus.
Mike Sierra Foxtrot.
Well, in that case, what I might do then is I'll just hand it over to you for the next 5 minutes or so, Jacinta, to talk to around the ethical side of data and your experiences in that space. Kia ora.
Ka pai te toa hine. Tuatahi rā kamihi atu au ki a tātou katoa ko tau mai nei, āmati hiko nei, ki tēnei kōrero o tātou. Tuatahi, ka mahi hoki au ki te hunga mate i tēnei wā. Ka tahi anō au ka rongo tētahi o ngā manukura, ki roto i te mahi o ngā upoko tukutuku, ko Robin East tēnā. Nō reira, ka mihi atu au ki te kuiara, kia Robin, Robin, haere atu rā, haere ki te tihi o manono, kia ua i te moe. O tira, koutou katoa ngā mate o te wā, haere atu rā, koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody. Well, I just wanted to open up. I first wanted to acknowledge the passing of one of our ngā upoko tukutuku Māori subject headings stalwart. Her name was Robin East, and I just heard that she passed away in the weekend. Robin was quite instrumental in the development of ngā upoko tukutuku, particularly with the cataloguing aspect of that mahi, and I'm very sad to hear of her passing, and I just wanted to acknowledge that first before I talk. Kia ora tātou. Thanks for having me, Carla. I'm very excited to kind of chat about my mahi in the data space. So my name is Jacinta Paranihi Anai. I whakapapa to the East Coast, Tai Rāwhiti, Ngāti Porou, Tautanga Hauiti on my mum's side, and then on my dad's side, I'm from a place called Halcombe or Tukorangi, Halcombe. and we are tūwhare toa e Ngāti Raukawa ki te tonga. And I am currently working at D.R.E. I'm the Pautoko Tūhono. That's the Program Strategy and Engagement Lead for Mātauranga Māori that we're working with in our heritage institutions. And I just started, but I have a background. Some of you I know online here. We've worked together before at National Library. And yeah, I've been in the, I guess I've kind of still been in information management and knowledge management. Of course, I've spent time in Statistics New Zealand, where I was working with Māori and iwi data. And so I guess coming back to our kōrero here, Carla, you asked me to talk about what data is, like what is it and why is it important? And I guess like in terms of a general definition, data is just the type of information, you know, facts, numbers, statistics that's collected, it's categorized, and it's used to inform certain things. And from my perspective, why do I think it's important? Well, so I'm a person that sees data as a part of a larger thing. So information to me is the thing, and data are the parts that might make up that particular thing. And I guess a basic example, like say if you took a non-fiction book as the thing, the information, and the details that sit within it are bits of data. Just like you might see a database, that's the vessel that holds a lot of data. The context with which you use and you apply to that database, it will provide you with information. And so yeah, to me, data is kōrero and data is whakapapa. So in a Māori context, Māori data is digital or digitizable information that is about Māori people, places of significance to them, kaupapa, practices like tikanga and kawa, Mātauranga Māori. But it's also data, you know, that's for Māori, that Māori need to make informed decisions about their people and their way of life, and the environment to which they coexist in. So Māori data, you know, it exists in across many different domains, such as health, education, economy, business, social justice, infrastructure, all kinds of things, emergency response, climate change, all kinds, very broad. And we use it, you know, to understand our demographics, our populations, our communities in Aotearoa, here and abroad as well, which then, of course, you know, forms a whole bunch of things. And in government, our policies, strategies, research, evaluation, and the monitoring requirements that we do in government. But also, you know, in many different like institutions across Aotearoa, at the community level, organisations, charitable trusts, and of course, iwi hapu marae. And to Māori, especially Māori data, it is a cultural, strategic and economic resource for iwi Māori. That's why it's so important, even now, like for iwi and hapu and marae. So I love to use the wharenui as a concept of how or what I see Māori data as. So to me, the whakairo, the tukutuku, the parts of the whare, whakapapa and kōrero, with what I see as Māori data, it tells you, you know, the people seeking that knowledge, who that whare represents and what the kaupapa might be to them, because you can see it through the kōrero of the whare, and connection to the environment that's outside the whenua, might be maunga and awa. For example, one of my whare, we have pātiki, we have flounders painted inside our one, and that's to signify the connection to the river, to our awa, rangitike, that once had pātiki, it doesn't now, but that's another kōrero anyway. Yeah, so and the structure of the house, I would argue might represent digital. So the wood, the material, the paints, the varnish, the benches, the lights, everything like that you know, the temperature thing, that keeps everybody warm in the winter and cool in the summer. You know, those things to me might represent digital, because that's like an infrastructure that's needed to bring those stories to life. So yeah, that's where I see it at the moment. And my other thing was, data should always inform. The way in which data is gathered, that's really important. And like, I mean, I've been around in the game, in the data space and statistics space for a few years now. And, well, you know, we often see a deficit lens applied because we're looking for gaps and ways to fill them. And essentially, you know, our government data system is built that way too. And in Aotearoa, we tend to tell stories with using data that highlight high deprivation across the motu. We've got like a deprivation index, I think it's called, currently maintained. We have, you know, surveys and studies around crime rates and poor health outcomes, unemployment, failure in schools, which often tell a bleak picture of Māori, and not just Māori, but vulnerable communities. And I guess over time, you know, the more you look at it, the more depressing it can feel, you know, and you often end up ignoring it, like, oh, okay, oh, and here's another, you know, statistic about smokers, oh, go on. But anyway, it's like if there was a system in place, you know, they could look at, you know, measuring aspiration as opposed to highlighting desperation, we can achieve. So yeah, like I want to share with you, you know, my sort of personal story. So behind me is one of my maunga. It's called Nuhuti, and it's in Anora Bay. And yeah, I just want to share with you a scenario that's very, very real and very close to me. So currently, I'm working with my marae, Hine Tamatea Marae in Anora Bay, East Coast of the North Island. And we're currently trying to find funding to fix our urupa that was damaged last year in March by flooding. Yeah, from a cyclone. And it just, you know, the heavens opened up and all this rain came and it had nowhere to go, and it ended up spilling onto parts of our pā and our urupa, and parts of our urupa washed away. And so now we're trying to find funding to fix it. And I've been working on our marae development plan. We didn't have one before, and I wrote the first draft. And throughout that process to get there, which involved hui, meeting whānau that perhaps, you know, we have met each other before, and forming relationships, meeting through Zoom actually, because, you know, with Gabrielle and Cyclone Hale as well, whānau haven't been able to get to the East Coast so easily, especially ones like me who live here in Poneke. And what I can see is we need our data. We need data about how many of us are part of Hine Tamatea Marae, but how many of us, you know, whakapapa to those that are currently in the urupa. And this is because we've given our whānau the opportunity, you know, in addition to fixing the issues surrounding the urupa and the pā itself, we've also opened up to the whānau to, if they'd like to move their loved ones, you know, elsewhere if they choose. So we're generating, you know, a lot of data within the scope of our marae plan, the work we want to do in the urupa, and other things like protecting, because our marae is literally on, you can see that beach there, it's on the beachfront, it's very close. And I think some of you from Whakahau might have gone there a few years ago, so you'll know what I'm talking about. Climate change is real to us, cyclones is real to us, as is the slash kaupapa, that's real to us too. And, you know, I'm petrified. I'm terrified that something will happen, you know, to our urupapa, to our pā. And I'm not alone. We're all sort of on edge. We want to get things done quickly. But I can see we need not only to work together, but we need that different kinds of data to inform how we work together, moving together as Ngāti Wakarara, Ngāti Hau, our hapu, and working together as uri of Hine Tamatea, our ancestors, our kuia, our tipuna kuia. So yeah, I can see, we need all kinds of different data so that we can protect the pā from environmental, climate change, those sorts of things, information about funding too, and what's going on in Aotearoa, because we're not the only ones on the coast that are struggling. We can see our whānau in Te Mātauranga Māori in the Hawke's Bay, and they are struggling too. So yeah, you know, my heart goes out to them as well. And hopefully when we are successful, we can share our journey and our process with others, with other marae, even wider than Tairāwhiti, to marae that are coastal marae like us, or live on or live close to a riverbank, because that's another kōrero too. So yeah, I hope I've answered what, you know, data is, why it's important. Data contributes to our oranga and our overall well-being. It's used to enlighten and inform now and in the future, and in the mahi we're trying to accomplish, and the kaupapa that we believe in. Nō reira, e hoa mā, a kamutu. I think I've said too much. Add more, but
Oh, nā mihi
Thank you.
nui, Jacinta. It's always a pleasure to hear you talking about your experiences and data. And it's good to hear that those different examples of what data actually entails, because I think we often forget that. Which leads me very nicely into our next speaker, which is Mātakiwi Wakefield from Christchurch City Libraries, who I gave her the wet or the challenge of talking about data from a Mātauranga Māori perspective, and how you could perhaps go about authentic engagement with Māori communities, which, to be honest, actually applies to all communities. And as Jacinta said, that's, you know, it's not just good for Māori, it is good for everyone. So kia ora, Mā.
O tēnā tātou e te whānau whakaroko mai nei, I mātakitaki mai nei mai ka tōpetu o te ao. Ko ahau tēnei ko Mātakiwi Wakefields, me ki he kaitaka wainga Māori, kei rō nā rātonga Māori ki te whare mātauranga o tautahi. Nō reira me tuku mihi hoki ki a koe ana, naui arahi tēnei kaupapa, a tai atu ki a koe Carla. Hoki te mihi ki a koe e Jacinta i te rongo o te mate. Nō reira te whānau whānui mātakitaki mai nei ka whati o i te parawama, kia whāngai te katoa. Hi everybody, my name's Mātakiwi Wakefield. I am a kaitaka wainga Māori with Māori and Multicultural Library Services here at Christchurch City Libraries. And one of the things that I've been asked to talk to you about is about, and I call it Dr. D.R.E, so all you 90 kids will be feeling me on that. So the importance of D.R.E is that it's a data research and evidence strategy, and it's at a high level for libraries in collecting and analysing and using data, research and evidence to help us more effectively tell our story about the difference that our libraries makes. It's also about supporting the value input that our libraries have. It also provides us with evidence-based research and findings. One of the things I find really exciting about this work is that we're able to tell our stories in our voice. We get to stand in our truth and if you like, own our truth, own our story, own our voice. And one of the things that Carla has asked me to talk to you today about is about Mātauranga Māori and not being afraid of it. Mātauranga Māori basically is another knowledge system. And I was thinking about it when I was coming to work today, that if we were to call it awesome, and all of you library people have heard of awesome training before, if we were to call it awesome, everybody be there. everybody be signing up to do it. But there seems to be a big fear within our community of Aotearoa that anything that may have a Māori connotation or a Māori influence in it is not good. And the reality is that it's actually the opposite. It's just another way of doing things that actually incorporates values in a deeper sense and adds another layer to it. The cool thing about Mātauranga Māori is that it helps you explore more deeper than just surface level your findings. For example, manaakitanga. Well, most people just think manaakitanga is how you look after a person, but it's a lot more than that. It's about how you care for them, the system and way you care for them, and the approach that you take. Similar with your data. With data, the reason why data, I suppose, is, and Jacinta mentioned it before, or someone mentioned it before about tapu, data's sacred because it's come from the head. It's come from our mind. It's come from our thoughts. And that's why, like, when we look at our collections, all of our collections, our libraries, whether it be school, tertiary or public or special libraries, are actually a collection of people's thoughts and beliefs, and right or wrong should be valued. And what Mātauranga Māori does is that it provides a lens for us to be able to look at it from a different angle and appreciate it from a different angle. And every culture has some form of the system within their knowledge-based systems. We're really cool. Sorry, not cool. We're really pleased here at Christchurch City Libraries to be part of my projects as a kākaho is to be running a D.R.E project, which looks at some of our programming within Ngā Māori, within Māori Library Services, and it's about applying various lenses. Now, we've started small, even though D.R.E is high level and it looks at the whole of the library systems. We've started small because so that we can get a snapshot of where our library's at the moment with its data, research and evidence value base. And if we're going to be able to sell it as a Mātauranga Māori, and I'm not saying sell it as in the sense of come out and buy it, but if we're able to walk our talk, if you like, and say, and put our name behind, and I'm talking about Māori Library Services name behind our project with our library, we need to be able to show the support that this framework has given us. So it comes in I'm presuming most of you have seen it. It comes in two parts. The first part is a maturity model. So it looks at where your library or your particular unit is at with recording, collecting, and evaluating data. And then the next part of it is that what impact does those findings have on your library or your unit? How well are you being able to service or provide services, resources or programming to your community and your wider community? The beautiful thing about D.R.E is that it has the ability to not just start off small as in one unit in your library and then grow to your library. It's about a country a whole nation focus, if you like. It's about working across the whole sector. And it's about moving away from the silo effects that I find sometimes within libraries, that we tend to silo a lot of our stuff and we don't work enough together and support each other enough within areas that we may be thriving in. My question to a lot of you, and I've been sitting there looking at where the participants basically are from, is how many of you actually have a bicultural service philosophy? How many of you actually have a bicultural strategy within your libraries? And that's probably a good place to start and a good place to leave. But my point to everybody is that it looks quite overwhelming when you look at it, but once you sit down and take it in chunks, it's actually a really good piece of work, and I'd like to acknowledge those that have worked on it. So kia ora koutou, if you've got any questions, leave them down in the chat, and yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Ma, for sharing your insights and your thoughts on that process. Just conscious of time, so I'm just going to shoot straight across to you, Kay. So I'll let Kay introduce herself and she can talk to her experiences with using the data research and evidence strategy. All yours, Kay.
Kia ora koutou, ko kei hui a tuku ingoa, he rangatohu service leader ki te Oho Māori o Kirikiriro. So I'm the team leader here at Waiwhero St Andrew's Library and also Manga o Nua Hillcrest Libraries here in Hamilton. And I'm a baby to data research and evidence, like it's quite new for me. And although my project is centered in Mātauranga Māori, I realize the need to draw on elements of D.R.E, data research and evidence. So my focus question for my project is, how do we cultivate the capability of staff to design and deliver Mātauranga Māori inclusive children's programs? So my immediate thought was to investigate what training we have for staff, and I would be looking at outcomes in training. So if we go to the next slide, please. Can it move? So the next slide is that we would create new staff training modules and provide focused training for staff that already deliver children's programs so that they would deliver engaging bilingual story times. So I don't think my slides are moving. It's okay, we'll just carry on. So I'm up to slide 3. Can it move? Oh, I am. Am I sharing this? Sarah, are we able to move? Cool. Move to slide 3. Here.
I'm moving it, but is it not moving?
Oh, I can't see it. I'm not sure if anyone else can.
Let me just try again, Eho, sorry. Let me just share this. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Now I am moving.
Yes, thank
Yep.
you. Okay, and to slide 3, please. Okay. So before you put down your garden, and I'm a baby to gardening as well, I've learned it's important to put some compost together. And so before I started my project, well, at the beginning, I had some new questions that I needed answered. I wanted to know, what is our purpose of libraries and story times, and how do we know if we are adding value? And how do other library teams train their staff for children's programming? And so I started to begin my research and collecting information. I began with my own organisation's documents. I felt my project should link directly to 2 important outcomes from our library strategy, which is in literacy and learning and culture and community. And we also have a bicultural commitment in the library, and our council has He Pau Manawa Ora, Pillars of Wellbeing Strategy. And I felt it's important to know what our values are and our commitment to te tiriti on these strategic frameworks as we move forward. I also watched the LIANZA webinar on early literacy story times and training presented by Alicia Harbson-Price and Emma Stillwell. Amazing webinar. They've also written their master's papers referencing libraries and training with connection to story time. And the webinar pointed to other readings around early literacy and Te Whāriki. Te Whāriki is New Zealand's curriculum for early childhood education that covers the education of children from the time they are born until age 5. Then I was able to have conversations with children and young persons librarians from Christchurch and Auckland libraries. Having access has been a real benefit of being a kākaho. And I've also had conversations with our own training staff. And in preparing all this compost, I discovered what early literacy is. I also discovered that parents are first teachers, and our role for libraries, and well, we didn't actually know what our purpose was before I started asking the question, but from asking this question, we found out our role is modelling to parents how they can develop their children in early literacy, and we can be more intentional in how we develop our programs when we understand our role and purpose. So that is where my project is at, because then I ran into some challenges. The first challenge was know the paperwork. Templates update. I wrote my project as a design brief. That's what I knew. I didn't ask the right questions, and then I found I needed to write it as a memo. So that was another job and process in the work. Also know all the people involved. My project needed sign off but I needed to make sure it had been pitched to the right people, not just my team leader, but then it needed to go to the library lead team. And then there are also other team leaders who have oversight for storytime programs. So I've been pitching this a lot of times, and I probably could have cut down, I could have managed that time better if I had pitched to everyone that needed to be involved in it at the beginning. And then also, another potential challenge will be cultural capability. We don't have a dedicated Ratonga Māori role, so we will need to draw on collective knowledge across our libraries. So moving forward, creating a training program for new staff will need to become a future project. That is a huge piece to unpack. But what we can do right now is develop our staff who currently deliver programs. It's timely to prepare for Matariki and Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. So to begin, we can start collecting data. We can survey our staff, beginning with a temperature check before our first hui, to find out who has presented bilingual story times, what Te Reo Māori is spoken by staff to gauge fluency, how often is Te Reo Māori used in current story times, story used for Matariki, what stories are used for Matariki, or stories in Te Reo Māori that our children's programmers may have used. The Waiata staff are comfortable singing any Māori games that they're familiar with or use, and this will determine our start point for training. We can also identify tuakana teina, who, fluency levels. Who will be the tuakana, who will be the teachers, and who will be the learners. And this will be able to pair in our training. We can also draw on what staff already know and then leverage from there. So I felt we should also establish hui tikanga, meaning we begin with mihi welcome, karakia waiata, whakawhanaungatanga, which is a sharing time. It's something we already do. And then ako learning time. Again, that's something we already do, but I don't always know if our people know the Māori equivalent for that. But as we establish, our hui tikanga, then it will help normalise cultural practice. Later on, we can gather data around crowd attendance. Has Māori customer engagement increased? I think that can be tricky to determine. We'll have to think about how we gather that data. But as it is an action-led project, we can collect pictures, maybe take video, collect stories from staff and customers that might show how engagement has increased. And then at the end of it all, we can survey our staff again to see if comfort levels have increased, or just the knowledge around applying Mātauranga Māori into the programs has increased. So yeah, that is me. Nō kia ora everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate, for sharing your experiences of your project. I asked Kate specifically just to talk about those challenges, because we all need persistence and resilience when we're trying to get things to happen within our organisation. She was a bit nervous about it. I was like, no, I just want you to talk about what you've had to do with regards to that. Which then leads us lovely into our last one, which is Danny Tiata from Upper Hutt Libraries. I kind of asked him to look at this research and stuff from the more Pacifica perspective and the different kind of tools or perhaps that you could use it if you wanted to engage with those communities and his experiences of what he's done. So I will pass the rako on to you, Danny. Kia ora.
Kia ora and talofa everyone. Ko Danny toku ingoa. I'm currently based out in beautiful Upper Hutt libraries where the weather is always good. Yeah, so thank you to my fellow kākahos. It's allowed me less time to talk to you guys, so that's always good. In regards to D.R.E, yeah, I think a lot has been said, the importance of gathering data for myself and for my team at Upper Hutt, you know, as we look to develop our community engagement plan. A lot of that is about connecting and gathering stories and data. I've never always been one for data. I always just thought 2 + 2 is 4 and that was enough. But in libraries, the importance of the stories that we capture out in the library, but also out in our community. So things like talanoa and kōrero, they're all based around discussions. You know, as a Pacific Islander, you know, the way we decide on things, timeframes is completely different to someone else, another culture. It could take a lot of discussions, but they're always open and honest. Yeah, so I guess for myself and the team, how I've sort of implemented some of the learnings from the D.R.E is the approach that we take and how we identify different community groups, learning about them, having a better awareness, and just, I guess, there's a word ainga, which is treat them like family. The information that you gather, you know, it's all about trust, respect, but most importantly, it's about listening. And yeah, it's like I said, data hasn't always been my thing, but being a part of this project, it's more about numbers, it's about the stories, it's about how we can help as a sector to support our community. Yeah, but yeah, because it's also been about flexible, how we approach different parts of the community, like Upper Hutt is a community that is growing. It has a lot of different ethnic groups, but we also, rather than reinvent the wheel, we call upon our connections that we already have in the community, plus within our wider council. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's more than just about numbers. It's about, you know, the stories and capturing them in the right way. Yeah. Yeah, but if you ever in Upper Hutt, there's a lot of cafes here. Yeah. So I've just allowed enough time for questions because I know there'll be heaps of questions.
As always, we always love hearing from you, Danny, and I think it's I hope everyone has kind of come away with something from today's webinar. I am real conscious of time. We've got another webinar happening at 1 o'clock. So if anyone had like a question that was absolutely burning, I've got time for one. Otherwise, I will look at just making some final comments and then wrapping us up for today. If you're whakamark, say it out loud, you can chuck it in the chat, or you can, you know, unmute yourself and say it out loud. So I'm going to give it just a few seconds. All good. You know, like I said, if you're a bit whakamā, you could put it in the chat, but I'm going to take the chance to kind of wrap us up around some of the stuff. So hopefully you would have got from that session, you know, it was awesome what Danny was saying, particularly around, you know, treating them like whānau, like family. You know, if you be aware that when you're having these interactions, and like I said previously, this applies to all communities. So it's not just our Māori, it's not just our Pacifica communities, it applies to any areas where you're wanting to collect data. You know, you need to do it in an authentic manner. And, you know, I think that's a really good way to look at it. Treat them as you would treat your whānau. This is the whānau you like, by the way, not the whānau that you perhaps don't like so much, because we all have those in our families. And keep in mind what it is, you know, how you would treat them and how you would interact with them. I think the other thing that was really valid that came through, particularly from Danny, it's around time. It's going to take as long as it takes. You may have a set time frame that you need to work within, but for a lot of communities like that, trust has always been quite an issue. So that's going to take time. And if you realize that, maybe you need to start earlier around how you engage and how you work with those communities moving forward. And the other one that really came home to me, particularly when Jacinta was talking about often data, particularly for Māori communities, or as she said, vulnerable communities, it's always from the deficit. It's always around the negatives, around, oh, you know, this is what they do wrong, or this is what's missing. You know, actually look at it from a different perspective. So look around, what could we do to improve? You know, what is it that they would want, or what is it that they feel is missing from us that could actually improve and make things better for them? So one of the biggest takeaways for me is around switching it up. You know, we're done with looking at things from a deficit, from a negative perspective. Actually, we want to start looking at things much more positively and how we can improve. So it's not how our communities can improve, it's how we can improve so that they actually feel more comfortable around using our services, which then just adds to our ability to get more funding, because it's showing our value to the communities and things that we're within. Like I said, I've got 1 minute, so I will just close us off with a karakia. I'll take this opportunity once again to say thank you to the kākaho and Jacinta for coming in and sharing their views, their perspectives, and their experiences of using the data. So ngā mihi nui kia koutou. It's been fabulous to hear from you fellas. And just to close us off, I will finish this off with a karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te urutapa nui. Kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takatā, koera e rongo, whakaria ake ki runga, kia tīna, tīna, hui tae ki e. So once again, thank you everyone for signing in and attending today's webinar. It has been recorded, so Anna will be making that available at a later date once a few things are probably tidied up. So, kia ora everyone, have a good day, and I might see some of you around, you never know.